Yeah, so hello everyone. Still a few people joining us, but yeah, we'll move on. So yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to this Footsteps Festival event entitled Footsteps Into Mindfulness. So we're going to be talking about mindfulness practice and particularly in relation to managing pain. Um, so yes, I'm here with three colleagues, and we're going to be that's Nikki, Chris, and Dermot, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. We're all volunteers, co-producing the festival between us. It's a mixture of lived and learned experience running the festival. So just to say a little bit about myself and my experience of mindfulness, just to introduce things. So I'm a person with lived experience of pain, have been for many years, and I have found mindfulness to be of enormous benefit to me in terms of the way in which I manage my pain, and in some ways, almost it's not that it's worth having pain, but the benefits I've experienced through developing mindfulness because of pain, and also crossed over into my life as well. So um, I've found that by practicing a mindfulness of breath practice every day, twice a day, and also the metta practice, the self self love practice that I've developed. It's emotionally, it's had an enormous effect, and psychologically, I feel much calmer. I've been able to cope. It's improved my sense of resilience, and knock-on effects like improved concentration, better sleep. I even find it easier to regulate my diet. So it's had a huge impact just in those respects. But in terms of pain, I find, well, it enables me to cope better because of those effects. But also, for me, it actually reduces my pain as well. So I don't, that's not necessarily something that happens for everyone, but that's certainly a benefit I find. So I no longer take my gabapentin because it's really one or the other, because the gabapentin causes mental sort of fuzziness, so it's not, you can't really do both in my experience, and I find it's as effective, if not more, without any side effects. So I've had a huge benefit, and one of the things I have done is to do Dermot's speaking in a little while, his mindfulness course, long mindfulness course, which he holds with Footsteps, and I found that was really beneficial also in terms of refining and improving my mindfulness practice. So I heartily recommend that at the outset. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say. So I'm going to hand over now to one of my colleagues, and we'll go around and talk a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll progress through the schedule. So handing over to Chris.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to hear that your experience and how mindfulness really helps you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Pendington. I'm one of the core Footsteps team. I've been on this team with the others on the screen here since we started towards the end of 2020. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked for a lot of years generally in a pain management service. Currently, I work at Newcastle University, and I'm part of the orofacial pain management service here. So my interest in mindfulness, I started it from a professional interest around about 2007. I decided that I really would like to be able to teach mindfulness because it was looking like it was really useful for pain. So I went on an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course. And after that, I actually went on to go to Aberdeen University, and I got an MSc in mindfulness studies, which included a lot of mindfulness, and a lot of it was taught in the Buddhist tradition, which I found really, really useful. As I went through learning this mindfulness, for a long time, I really didn't want to teach it because I was finding it so personally useful, which is something that I hadn't expected. Bearing in mind that I'm trained as a clinical psychologist and I really ought to know kind of about emotions, I'd never really experienced what I got from mindfulness in terms of helping me to get more in touch with my own emotions and helping me to experience more emotions but be less bothered by them. So it was really like a personal journey for me, and really helpful. It wasn't until 2016 that I actually did qualify as a mindfulness teacher, and I've used it in my work as well, but I still really find it far more useful on a personal level, and I use it a little bit in my work, but very much personally. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Chris. A lot of that resonates for me. Hi everyone. It's lovely to have so many people back again for this Footsteps into Mindfulness session. Oh, someone's sharing. You might want to unshare, whoever's doing that. But anyway, so my name is Dermot Dennehy. I am one of the Footsteps team. I guess I'm a physiotherapist at in London in a pain centre there. But this is really about reflecting on mindfulness and what it means to us. And I guess it's a really simple question, but quite a deep and difficult. When I reflect on it, it's what is it about mindfulness? I guess my accent might betray the fact that I'm from Ireland. So I've grown up in quite a traditional Catholic kind of environment, I think it's fair to say. And I suppose with that, there was a strong sense of spirituality and kind of community. And as you go through your rebellious years and stuff like that, and perhaps step away from that, you realize actually there were aspects of that were really quite helpful and nice. And through my 20s, I suppose, I started exploring other belief systems and philosophies. And in 2005-06 time, and I know this because it's coming up to my wedding anniversary and we were actually on honeymoon, and I went off on a retreat on my own. My wife was delighted at the time, but that was when I first did a 10-day silent retreat to kind of really explore some of these principles. And a lot of it resonated, aspects of it didn't, but I think that's okay. That's the same with everything we encounter in life, I guess. But I took from that an interest in a regular practice, and a bit like you, Chris, I guess I wanted to explore that more. And I was lucky enough in work in about 2008 to be offered, as part of work, a place on one of our 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction programs. One of my colleagues, a clinical psychologist there, was running them, and so I got to do that. And then I maybe did that every year for 3 or 4 years, doing that course, until I got to a point of thinking, actually, maybe I could look at this even further and train in it a bit more, and started exploring teacher training routes via Bangor University and then Oxford Mindfulness Centre, where I did a year in foundations in teaching and practice about maybe 10 years ago now, I think, roughly. So I personally, it's been very helpful, from a well-being perspective, both physical and emotional and mental health aspects to it. I find it very, very useful, especially having 2 boys who are now turning into teenagers, so possibly will challenge my practice even more for the next few years. But I suppose one thing that struck me about it is there's a lot of misunderstandings about these approaches and mindfulness. So I think sessions like this can be really helpful at kind of breaking down some of the misunderstandings about it and really thinking about what it actually is. And I guess the other thing which I'm particularly passionate about is allowing this to be accessible to as many people as possible. My experiences of it in the past was that it could be quite prohibitively expensive to take on courses like this. So something I've been passionate about has been looking at ways to offer this to as many people as possible. So so in part, that's great that the Footsteps Festival that we offer that. We'll give more details of that towards the end of this session. But perhaps selfishly, one of the biggest things I get out of running programs and courses is that kind of opportunity to connect with new people and to refresh my own practice. So I'll be talking about that in a moment, but the value of sitting or just practicing with other people, I just can't stress how valuable that is enough. So again, having communities like this coming together is really, really precious. So I'm going to stop talking now and back to you, Nikki, to share your experiences.
Thank you, Dermot. Hi, everybody. I'm Nikki. I'm another core member of the Footsteps team from the beginning, and it's lovely to see you all here. I've had severe facial pain, nerve pain, for 19 years now, and I've had times when I've been really very disabled by it. Did all the, conventional things, and I was on very high opioid doses and lots of surgery and stuff. And three and a half years ago, I found a pain management app that introduced me to mindfulness and meditation. And within 3 months of starting using the app and having a good mindfulness meditation practice, I'd reduced my pain and my suffering by a significant amount. Made a massive impact on me. I started to feel like I had a life again. When I started, I could hardly walk, I was lucky if I could walk a kilometre. And, a few months ago, I cycled 170 miles in, 3-4 days. So, my life has changed a lot, and mindfulness has been foundational to that recovery. I have to do mindfulness every day. It's part of my life. It's intrinsic in how I live now. It doesn't make it. It's no panacea, but it makes life easier. It makes things better. It makes me able to see things in a different way. I spend a lot more time in the present. When I'm doing the horses, I look at the birds, I look at the trees, I look at them, obviously, but I experience so much more out of life now. And I've had some pretty gnarly experiences in the last 3 years trying to come off opioids. It's been very difficult and challenging at times. And it's been mindfulness that has got me through that, because you can do anything in that moment. So for me, it's really important, and it's given me a lot of benefits, and it's helped me in a lot of stuff. So that's me, and I'll pass you back to Mark now.
Sorry, unmute. Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, and a lot of what you say resonates with me as well. It's a completely integral part of my life, and like it or not, I do it every day. Sometimes it's difficult, but it's always worthwhile. Yeah, so I'd like to pass over to Dermot now, who's going to give us a bit of an overview of mindfulness and maybe a little bit more. So I'll leave it in his capable hands.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, this is it's not going to be death by PowerPoint slides, hopefully, but just to give you a sense of what we mean by mindfulness and an overview, as it were. So most people will be aware that mindfulness is often thought of as a type of meditative practice or meditation, and its origins are very much from Eastern philosophical approaches like Buddhism and Hinduism, amongst others. And I suppose really when we think about how it's practiced predominantly, not by everybody, but in kind of Western cultures, is very much down to the kind of passion of these guys here. So on the right, we've got John Kabat-Zinn, who's a professor in the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and Saki Santarelli, and they kind of devised the 8-week program that many people who take it will be familiar with now. So that's kind of its origins. They started looking at using mindfulness for people with long-term conditions, particularly chronic pain and chronic heart conditions in Massachusetts in the medical school there, when their colleagues were approaching them saying that many patients they had were really struggling and could they think of anything to offer them. So that's kind of the origins as we know it, and perhaps as in the form of the course that we offer on one of the courses we offer on the Footsteps program. And John wrote this, I call it a wonderful book. It's almost like a Bible of meditation. And I think it might be in the links. If not, it's available in most libraries, so you don't even have to buy it now, but called Full Catastrophe Living, which I think is one of the best titles for a book ever. But if you did want to delve further into mindfulness, I'd highly recommend this as a very approachable open book to start with. The concept that we often start with when we think about introducing mindfulness and how it might help is the concept of monkey mind. Now, we may all be familiar with this, even if we don't know what it's called, but I suppose in short, our monkey mind is our mind's tendency to jump around all of the time. You know, from what did I have for breakfast? What am I having for tea? Who's coming tomorrow? How am I going to manage that? Ouch. You know, all the things that our mind jumps from and to, a bit like a monkey, you know, an agitated monkey. And so mindfulness as an approach is thought to offer us a systematic way of training our minds to be able to focus on what it is we choose, rather than having this monkey jump around randomly from one thing to another without any control on our part. I quite like this as a way of kind of helping us to understand what mindfulness is about. It's about thinking about the present moment, noticing how very often our minds are in the future or in the past with that monkey mind. And then actually sometimes if we bring awareness to our body, we tend to ground ourselves in the present moment. So it will come as no surprise that some of the practices in mindfulness are about noticing our bodies in this present moment as a way of grounding us in the now. Appreciating that the future hasn't happened yet and the past has already gone, and there's very little we can do about either of those. What we can really effect change in is the present moment. So Jon Kabat-Zinn, in really short, tends to define mindfulness as practicing being. And what that means is, you know, present moment awareness, as we've already said, non-judgmentally. So during training in mindfulness, often we start to bring awareness to how every time we're noticing something, we may have a judgment attached to that. We might like it or not like it. You know, we might be very fond of it or really dislike it. And there are types of judgments that we bring to every experience that we have. And mindfulness encourages us to look at things non-judgmentally, to see if we can step back from those judgments that our minds tend to automatically have. It's about purposefully paying attention in the moment, you know, really setting an intention. And often with practices, we begin by setting the intention of what it is we're going to do. More recently, open-heartedness and kindness have been added to it, because actually you can practice present moment awareness non-judgmentally and purposefully and still be quite uncaring. You know, Jon Kabat-Zinn famously gave the example of snipers as being very mindful, but perhaps not people you would want to spend a lot of time with, because perhaps there isn't that element of compassion, open-heartedness and kindness there. So we're finding more and more that people are that in practicing mindfulness meditations, that we're adding in this aspect to the practice. Just a few things it's worth stressing about it. Mindfulness is not a religion in itself, although its origins may be from Eastern philosophies. It's very, and I know I mentioned my background and perhaps why that attracted me to it, but it's very compatible with any religious beliefs you may have, or no religious belief if you don't have any either. It's it can work either way. It's not a form of relaxation. Sometimes people expect to feel relaxed by practicing mindfulness, and actually that can be a real barrier, because if you're really expecting that and it isn't happening, then it can be very hard to continue with the practice. If we appreciate that sometimes bringing awareness to the present moment is hard, it can be difficult. You know, difficult things can come up when we put a lens over them or the microscope on them. But it can be possible to work with that through some of the practices that mindfulness can offer. It doesn't have to be sitting still like a statue for hours on end. You know, there are lots of different ways to practice meditation. You can do it walking, you can do it moving, you can do it when you're doing routine daily activities like brushing your teeth or going to the toilet, whatever it might be. It's not necessarily for everyone. Nikki mentioned this earlier. You know, it's not a panacea. Unfortunately, sometimes with, you know, in enthusiasm to encourage these approaches, it can be made to feel like it works for everything. And I know many people, I'm sure yourselves included here, will have heard, oh, you should try my, it'll work. And we know that it's not that straightforward. It's not that black and white. But there is a lot of evidence. There's lots of research, and today is not about, you know, bombarding you with loads of evidence. I'm sure you'll find it yourselves, or any of us will be happy to direct you to some research. And also, I know Nikki's going to be sharing a resource sheet which will have some links to some really helpful websites for the evidence. There's lots of evidence for how it might affect things like our mood and depression, but also how it might affect changes in our nervous system and our physiology. But as I say, I'm not going to go into that today, but knowing that it is there. I often have this picture, you know, sitting lovely under, that you can only practice these techniques if you've got access to beautiful Zen gardens or a beach, you know, with a Pacific Ocean lapping at your feet and things like that. No, mindfulness is about working with whatever you have available to you. My experience of running, you know, in my local area, I set up a weekly group, and the first venue we could hire was on the corner of a really busy junction. So we had lots of noise and traffic and, you know, things outside, and actually that provided material to work with, because mindfulness is just about noticing these things. It doesn't, although we might imagine having that quiet Zen space under the cherry blossom, it's about applying it wherever you are now. Often when we think of mindfulness, we think that it's going to clear out our minds somehow. You know, it's like a house cleaning for the mind, and it's really not that either. But it's more about noticing what comes up, what thoughts are present, what emotions might be there, what is there. It's about allowing the space to notice what's there already, rather than clearing stuff out. And it's also about observing what happens when we provide that space to observe these things, because sometimes some of those things might choose to leave the building all of their own accord when we give them the space to do that. There are broadly, drawing on the 8-week program that John Kabat-Zinn and Santorini developed, there are really 3 pillars of practice, or kind of long meditations, that are often encouraged. The first is body scanning. The second is movement with awareness. And then the third is bringing awareness to often our breath, our thoughts, and our feelings. And you'll find that the practices often are around at least one of those 3 pillars of mindfulness practice. And if you take up joining a program, then you'll get to experience those in more depth. I quite like the metaphor of the monkey trap as a way of thinking about our expectations. So for those of you not familiar, this is, I still find it hard to believe that this works, but it does. They put a little hole in the coconut and put a banana inside, and the monkey will just about get his hand in. He grabs the banana, but he can't get out unless he lets go of the banana. And I think it's a really nice metaphor for what our expectations might be by starting or kind of diving into mindfulness. And I think sometimes some books that I've read some books where they set quite high bars around what you're going to experience and how quickly. And I would say it's really important to hold that lightly. That actually, as Chris, you were sharing, and my experience has been, actually, it's a very slow process. And that, yeah, we all do it because we hope to gain something from it, you know, to benefit somehow, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, find connection, perhaps ease our pain. And they're all very noble reasons to want to do it. But I would say the skill with mindfulness is the ability to hold those expectations lightly. Sometimes if we're really holding on tightly to that banana, we might find that we're getting stuck. It holds us back from moving forward. And that's something that we will come up with again and again with when we're experiencing and practicing mindfulness. Sorry, this is one of my favorite beaches in the northwest of Ireland with my favorite mountain. I use it a lot with the mountain meditation that we do. But this is a quote from John Kabat-Zinn, which is, you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. And I think it speaks to this idea that it isn't always instantaneously relaxing or enjoyable. It can be, but sometimes it can be hard. And so part of developing if you like, a daily practice of mindfulness can be about just doing it and just being with whatever is there, as much as that is possible, or knowing when to choose not to, because actually it's not the right time for whatever reason. So having done a really brief introduction, there are various different ways that you can take a deeper dive, if that's what you want to do. To see what I did there, I'm very proud of that. This is my most proud slide. Thank you very much. So the first way you could do it is as I said, Nikki's done a great resource pack that we'll send out to you with lots of links to books and websites and apps. There's lots of them and that you can use with meditations of all different lengths. You might then start to explore it further by coming along to sessions like this, taster sessions, or looking at our video online after the event, or joining other information things, just to start to come to that community. You might choose to join a group. There may be one local to you, or there may be online groups as a way of starting to meet and practice more regularly with others. And often it's recommended to do an 8-week program of training if you really want to kind of embed some more formal practice into your routine. So we've been running the program now. We've run it a couple of times, and we have another one due to start in April. So you can have a look on the website for details of that. We've run it twice, and we've got some feedback from participants. So people like you who live with pain who've come on it. So I just thought I'd present some of those. You know, I'm sleeping better, easier to manage stress and to use in crises. It's given me extra skills to deal with life stressors. I feel more able to manage chronic pain and long-term health conditions, and I feel more positive. I've reduced my stress and anxiety and learned to relax more. I've also learned that it's okay to feel like I do. It's been an invaluable tool for deepening and intensifying my mindfulness practice. So some people come on 8-week programs like I did, like many of you may have done, having been on them before, because it's a way to further deepen your practice. You don't have to only do it once and never do it again. You can do 8-week programs as many times as you like, really. This course helped me to cement mindfulness more as a core part of my daily routine or activities of daily living. It's made me calmer and able to take enjoyment from mundane things. It'd be great if this were available to all patients who live with chronic pain or long-term health conditions. So remember, this is feedback from people who've done the program we run as part of Footsteps. It felt like a really safe space, engaging with other individuals within a safe environment, and I felt included. So I think there are really, that's, you know, it gives you a broad sense of about 25 people. We got feedback from about 16. So not bad feedback, but it's good to get a sense from people. So it's small numbers, but it gives you a sense of people who've done this course. It's not without challenges. So I wanted to put them up as well. You know, it's very easy just to say this is all wonderful and everyone should do it, but actually it's good to hear from people who've done it, who live with pain. Some people found it a bit long because generally the 8-week program is once a week, a session for 90 minutes to 2 hours, and that can be quite a long time. And so we've tried to adapt that by adding in break in the middle and encouraging people to move around as much as they need to. So similarly, sometimes 2 hours felt a bit long. I felt a bit overwhelmed by the amount of homework. So often, especially with the 8-week program, there's an invitation or encouragement to practice daily lots of different things. And so it's a commitment to do an 8-week program. I do like face-to-face meetings, but that hasn't been possible. So again, this is during lockdown, when before everything was lifted, whatever our thoughts might be on that. But yeah, when we were doing it online, there was a sense that actually it would be nice to meet in person, but actually doing it online felt very, very helpful as well. So that's why we've continued to run these events online. And I'm just going to end with this, which I just think is a really nice one about coming together in groups. As I said to you at the beginning, one of my motivations for running programs is that I get to sit with a group of people because I find that invaluable. So when people come together, they inspire each other like smoldering pieces of wood when brought together, blaze into a fire that is greater than its individual parts. I just think it's a really lovely way of framing this. And what we get by being in a group of other like-minded people practicing together. Practicing with a group allows us to enter into a new and deeper phase of our practice. So you can do it on your own, but you'll find most people who practice regularly for years, they have found groups that they connect with intermittently to help keep the spark alive for them, to help their flame to burn stronger. This is some feedback from the group again, who'd already done it. I know that I'm not alone. I can't say if it's changed my life, but I do feel like I'm so much, I don't feel like I'm so much on my own with the pain. Talking to others and discussing their experiences has helped me to take a differing view on how to apply the techniques. Meeting other people with shared experience of living with pain, that was valuable for one. It's been very helpful to be a member of a group of peers, all sharing the same experience. I found this gave me extra support and confidence in my mindfulness practice. I loved interacting with other members and sharing their stories and tips. I learned so much more from being in a group, sharing, practicing together rather than reading from a book. So that's everything from me, just as a kind of a overview of mindfulness. I hope that's helpful, but we're going to move on to Neki now because, to Chris, because a lot of mindfulness is more about experiencing rather than talking about experiencing. So thank you, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Dermot. Really great slideshow there, and some really great words of advice about taking things lightly and having a kind attitude. So in a minute, I'm going to lead us through a mindfulness practice, which will last about 12 minutes and hopefully give a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be practicing mindfulness. So before I do that, I've just got a few guidelines about the practice itself. And the first thing is that, like, traditionally you might see images of people with crossed legs sitting straight upright, which is fine. It's that's a good thing to do if you like to do that, and if you can do that. But the thing to really be aware of is this is not a stick to beat yourself with. This is not something that you think, I must keep this position and this is the most important thing. And what could be happening maybe is your pain is getting worse and worse, and rather than being mindfulness, actually what you're doing is you're gritting your teeth and you're just trying to tolerate sitting still, not moving because you think that you're not supposed to. And it just becomes a big fight with yourself, and it will help nobody. So really, this is where we come back to what Dermot was saying about take things lightly. And it's far better to look after yourself. You should always be doing this with an attitude of gentleness towards your own experience. So that means, like, the ideal position, probably you've got some contact with the floor or the ground, so you can feel maybe your feet on the floor, or you can feel yourself lying, your bum on the seat, or perhaps your back on the floor. You've got that groundedness. Ideally, you don't necessarily have to stay still, but if you move, you should be aware of it. Remember that mindfulness is all about awareness. So it's far better to notice if you're being uncomfortable and to make a conscious decision to move than it is to sit and grimace in agony. It's really, really important that you look after yourself through a practice. And especially we're doing this online. I would say this in person, but it's even more so online. You know your own bodies, you know how you're feeling today, you know your experience. I don't know that. So everything that I'm saying as I'm guiding you with the practice, you should make your own choice whether that's going to be a decent thing for you to do right now. Perhaps it's going to stir up your pain. Perhaps you really can't deal with it if that happens. Don't do it. Take the instructions lightly. Think of them as guidance. Don't think of them as what you must do. One more thing before I start off with the practice. Sometimes when you bring your attention into your body, you're paying attention to how you're feeling, you notice pain more. That might be okay. If there's sometimes attention to pain can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be immensely helpful. Sometimes, though, it can be overwhelming. So if you notice that your pain seems to be worse, you're worried that it might become overwhelming, you've got a lot of choices. You could just stop doing it for now. You could move. Another thing that can be really useful is that you can actually pay attention to the painful area, and then you can choose another area that's not so painful, and you can deliberately kind of switch your attention back and forward. So just dip it into the painful area and then go to somewhere that's more comfortable in your body. So this is definitely not a way of torturing yourself. This is something that genuinely should be helpful, and your attitude of kindness towards yourself and your experience, and knowing that you always have a choice, hopefully should help with that. So with that proviso, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make one sound of my bowl, which will signal the beginning of the practice. I'm going to gently guide us through a series of steps that hopefully should get us into a state of mindfulness for a short time. I'm also going to be suggesting that we scan our bodies quite quickly, and I'll talk us through that. Then we'll just follow the instructions. So just remember what I'm talking about. It's it's guidance. It's not what you must do. So I'll start now. So as you hear the bell ringing out, you might find a position that you hope to be relatively comfortable in for the next 10 minutes or so. Perhaps feet flat on the floor, back straight if possible, perhaps lying down. Just start to bring attention as much as you can into your body, as much as it feels safe to do so. Just notice what it's actually like to be here in this position just now. And if it feels okay to do so, bringing attention to the movement of the breath. So as we breathe, we notice also that our body might move. Perhaps there's some movement in and out from the chest. Perhaps we can feel that elsewhere in the body as well. Perhaps we can also feel some sensation around our mouth or nose as we breathe. We're trying to make at this point each breath in about the same length as each breath out. And it may help if we use counting to do this. So we might count to 3 or 4 on a breath in. We might make a similar count each time we breathe out. So at the moment, we have some awareness of our body, some awareness of our breath. We're also counting 3 or 4 on a breath in, similar on a breath out. And that doesn't mean that we don't have anything else in our minds. It's quite likely that there'll still be some other thoughts, some awareness, various responses, and that's just fine. We can just let that be there. We don't need to do anything about that. But we can just keep most of our attention on breathing and counting. And then in a minute, we're going to take a couple of deeper breaths in, if that feels okay to do so that we can notice the difference in the body between how it feels when we breathe in, how it feels when we breathe out. So if you just take a couple of slightly deeper breaths and really notice how it feels on the breath in, how it feels as you breathe out. Before letting the breath rest back into its natural rhythm. And for many of us, what we'll notice is that it takes some effort to breathe in, but the breath out happens naturally without force. And as we breathe out, often the body will release some of the excess tension that it's been holding without us even trying to do it. We might notice that our shoulders go down a bit. We might notice some sort of softening. And this can be a natural pattern, just a natural response of the body, that as we breathe in, we tense a little. As we breathe out, we let go. And in noticing this, we can allow our mind to learn from the body, so that as we breathe in, we just notice what's here. As we breathe out, we can just allow the mind to let go of any involvement with thoughts, any need to be in control, any sort of holding, any expectations of what should be in our mind. So we don't let go of thoughts, but we let go of any need to be in control of those thoughts, to monitor them. And we just continue to notice what it's like this moment, to be sitting here in this body, noticing what we're noticing, perhaps in our body, in our breath, and in our minds. Just observing it without feeling the need to get too involved. And then the next time we breathe out, we might do a long breath and imagine our attention going all the way down our body into the soles of our feet. And we move to a grounding stage of the practice, where we really notice, if it feels okay to do so, how it feels to have our feet perhaps planted firmly on the ground, or whatever it is that we notice from our feet. Perhaps there's quite a strong sense there, or perhaps not much to notice at all. So I'm going to talk us through a fairly quick scan of the body, and the important thing at this point is to be taking an attitude of gentleness, of kindness, of allowing ourselves to feel what we feel, and bringing kindness and openness to that experience. And again, remember that this is very much guidance, not something that you must do. So if there's a part of the body which might feel scary to put your attention into, it's absolutely fine to skip that, or just to very quickly dip attention into it. If the exercise itself becomes overwhelming, it's absolutely fine to focus on something different, like the movement of the breath, or something that you can look at in front of you. But if it feels okay to do so, just see if you can bring a really gentle, really accepting attitude to noticing whatever you notice, not just in the soles of your feet now, but expanding to include the toes, the upper part of the feet, the heels and ankles. Perhaps putting more of a quality of attention on just tuning into what's there without any expectation, but bringing kindness to it, moving also up the calves of the legs and the shin bones, up to the knees. Perhaps we might be curious, without looking, maybe we can tell whether our knees are bent or straight. What do we notice there? Just taking a really gentle attitude. And gently expanding our attention further to the backs of the legs and the fronts of the upper part of our legs. And up into our hips, the pelvis area, and the abdomen, and the lower back. Bringing some gentle, accepting attention to the fingers. Do we notice each finger separate, or do they feel as one? Noticing the palms and the backs of the hands, the wrists. Perhaps some of these areas might be painful, perhaps others might not be painful, might even be comfortable. How is it to just really gently explore each area of the body in turn, noticing what's there without trying to fight anything, but with an attitude of care that allows us to look after ourselves, whatever we notice. Tuning into the forearms and the elbows. Now the area around the waist. We might notice body sensations, and we might also tune into some sort of attitude that we have about our body. Perhaps we like our body, or perhaps not so. Perhaps we can be gentle with that attitude as well. Noticing and bringing kindness, whatever it is. Tuning into now the upper area of the back and the chest, to the upper area of the arms, and to the shoulders now, the back of the neck and the throat, the jaw, the inside of the mouth, the face, and the back and top of the head. And then, the best that we can, aiming to hold in awareness our entire body from head to feet. Noticing the subtle movement that occurs with the breath. Noticing perhaps that there are areas of discomfort, alongside also areas of comfort. Perhaps tuning in also to any warmth or pleasant sensations. Trying to hold it all in awareness. Trying to be really gentle as we notice all of our experience. Bringing our attention now to the feeling of the ground or the chair that we're resting on. Noticing that feeling of support, almost like an unconditional support offered to the body by the ground that we rest on. Just as the ground supports the body, our aim now is to allow the body to support the mind, so that in our awareness of the body we can allow our mind to rest. We might do this by imagining that we're resting our mind in our belly or somewhere low down in the body. Just have a few moments where we don't have to do or think anything. Simply rest the mind in the support and awareness of the body. Those of us who regularly practice mindfulness know that when we invite our mind to rest, it's usually not long before it wanders off, gets engaged in some thought or other. It's very normal, nothing wrong with that at all. Shows that we have a human mind. So as we try to practice mindfulness by resting the mind, we can also bring in a support which will help us to bring our mind back to that position of rest whenever it wanders. And what we can use as a support is our awareness of the breath. So we know that while we're noticing the in and out of the breath, the subtle movements of the body as we breathe, we know that that's a kind of anchor that can very lightly hold our awareness, that can keep the mind resting in the body. So as soon as we notice that we've become involved in some thought, that we're thinking about something, planning, remembering, all we need to do is look for the next breath in and just imagine that we're very, very gently, very kindly, carefully drawing our attention back into the body. back into this state of allowing ourselves to rest for now. Allowing ourselves to notice thoughts, to notice sensations, without getting any further involved in them. At the same time, also practicing noticing when the mind goes off on a little wander, gets engaged in thinking again, so that once again we can turn to our support. Just use the next breath in to gently bring our attention back into its place of rest, into its observer stance back in the body. Sometimes it can feel calm and relaxing. Sometimes it can be the most frustrating, annoying thing in the world. Either is okay. Just in allowing ourselves to notice how human minds do what human minds do. And if we notice once more that our attention has gone off, or perhaps we notice that it hasn't, we might be curious whether we also notice any commentary on that from our mind, any judgment, any sense of whether it's good or bad. We just let that be part of our experience as well. Something that we don't have to believe, we can just notice it as another thing that the mind's doing. So then as we become ready to end this practice in a minute or two, we might tune back once more into the body with the same attitude of kindness that we aimed to bring to it before. And we might notice, what does this body want from me right now? What would be helpful to this body? Are there certain movements that the body feels like it would like to make, after perhaps being still for a little while? And if it feels like there are some movements that would be helpful, very gently at first, starting to move, perhaps stretching a little, comforting, soothing our body. Keep noticing what it's like. How does our body respond to this movement? Gradually continuing with an attitude of looking after our body, looking after our experience in this moment. And before we actually go into our discussion, which is what we're aiming to do next, I'd invite everybody to continue to take a minute or two, either for a very short comfort break or to continue stretching, moving in a way that feels like it's going to be helpful to the body right now. Okay, so I hope that gave you some sense of what one form of mindfulness practice can be like. There was quite a long lead in that I gave there. The actual mindfulness bit is more the bit where the mind's resting, but giving deliberate attention through your body and noticing what's happening in the body are also important elements of mindfulness. And you'll find that different practices focus on different elements of experience, but really mindfulness is always about, as one of my teachers used to say, knowing what's happening while it's happening, just noticing whatever's happening, whether that's comfortable or not comfortable. Is developing that ability to observe and to do that in a kind way. So this is the point where Nikki and Dermot and Mark and myself, we might discuss our own experiences of mindfulness and what we've experienced, but also how we can take questions and respond to comments in the chat. Tim there commented that he actually did find that relaxing in spite of what was said earlier. And I think that's one of, and thanks very much, Tim, I really appreciate that. But also I think that's one of the kind of conundrums of mindfulness, that it might be relaxing, but the point is it might not as well. And it's all about expectations. And certainly in my experience, both practicing mindfulness myself and also a teacher, I find something that often happens is if you're doing a group, you're doing a practice in a group, somebody might have a really pleasant experience, they might find it really relaxing, they might find it really positive. And then sometimes that's great, but sometimes it can set an expectation for the next time. So they never get that again, or it takes a long time before they can let go of their expectations again. Because if the second time you're expecting it to be relaxing, it's a different experience because the first time you had no expectations. And sometimes that can be quite a barrier, I've found, to practicing mindfulness. Nice comment there, Florence. It was peaceful. My mind kept wandering though. Great comment. And I think so many people experience that. And I'm really interested in the kind of my mind kept wandering though, because actually, I think this is one of the myths about mindfulness that we need to bust, the fact that our minds shouldn't be wandering. Actually, most of the time our minds will be wandering. Maybe they'll be, if we're quite agitated, maybe they'll be wandering a lot. If we're quite calm, maybe not so much. Or if we've had more practice, maybe that will reduce the wandering. But the mind wandering is probably a really important part of mindfulness. And our mind will wander when we're mindful. And maybe the problem that we can have with that is if we think that shouldn't happen. And sorry, I just had to giggle at that mindful line there that suddenly just appeared on the screen and distracted me a little bit. So I really want to say quite strongly, it's absolutely fine that your mind wanders. Where it's a problem is if you start telling yourself that your mind shouldn't be wandering and maybe you're not doing it good enough and you should be doing it better. And that can make it more difficult, but we're human, our minds will wander. My mind was even wandering sometimes when I was talking through the practice, and I'm sure that's probably the same for a lot of people here on this call.
It's the muscle, isn't it? I mean, that the coming back to the present is the constant coming back is what builds the practice rather than staying in the present. And it took me a long time to sort of get that. And I would, as you say, I would start to berate myself a little bit about, oh, you know, you're all off and you're finding this really difficult today, and you know, this isn't doing you any good. But that simple act of just noticing you're off and coming back over and over is what builds the practice. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, Anna said there that somebody has found Zentangling really effective, and certainly for me, I find that if I'm feeling quite agitated, something quite solid to put my attention onto, like maybe Zentangling or colouring in or an actual activity, or perhaps walking and movement. It gives you something solid, and sometimes you need that depending on like how agitated your mind is. And then if you're feeling calmer, it's maybe easier to do it sometimes with just sitting. So yeah, it's knowing our own mind and knowing what we need at that time, and choosing something that's going to be right for us at that time.
I mean, I find present moment awareness itself is very important. Just that, you know, something that you do every day, where you can do it whenever, just being in that present moment. And that seems to be one of the things that actually helps my pain, as well as, you know, I do a practice every day, but I mean, it can be 10 minutes of a guided meditation. It doesn't need to be any more than that for me. If something's going on, I'll add in a couple a day, but you know, it's just that act of coming back to myself and to my body as I go throughout my day, as I, you know, do the washing up, do anything. It's really important. And one thing I found with mindfulness as I've gone on through the years doing it is my mind chatters less just day to day. I catastrophize less. I go down to the horses in the morning and I'm not going, in my mind's not going, oh, what if he's broken his leg? What would I do? And going off into a whole disaster scenario. I don't do that anymore. And that has been a really powerful sort of side effect for it. Not something I expected. I don't know if Mark or Dermot have found that as well, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, with this this sort of restless mind and the mind wandering, that it was when I accepted that was going to happen, and refined my practice, that's when it actually got much better. And as you say, Nikki, it's like that becomes part of it. Or I think you said that as well, Chris, that's, you know, the mind is going to do that, and it's okay, because I'd somehow got myself into, presumably just by drawing the wrong conclusions, the idea that you had to block out thoughts. And so I was almost like like American football. I was sort of trying to throw up blockers and keep out those thoughts, and that it worked up to a point, but it was really difficult and stressful. You made it very unpleasant to do. But yeah, once you actually sort of go with that and just accept it's going to happen and work with it, then I found that to be really beneficial. But I was also interested in what you were saying, Chris, about sort of maybe varying it and going walking, or a movement mindfulness, or as you were saying, Nikki, present moment awareness. Because I sometimes find that if I've done something that really has sort of exercised the mind, might be a crossword or whatever, then I find that the meditation is usually much easier. It's almost as if that I find this to be a good combination, to have done something mentally taxing and then meditate. If I try to meditate when my brain is feeling really restless, it can be done, but it's more difficult. So.
That's quite interesting, Mark, and yeah, this idea of mind wandering or wandering, and my observations with myself, but also with people who do the courses, the mind still wanders, but we're more kind to ourselves about it wandering. As you say, you tend to, it's not care less, I don't mean that and you don't care, but you care less about it. We hold light to this idea of it being a right or wrong way. An example is your example, Nikki, going down to the horses, and that maybe in the past noticing that thoughts might come up around, oh gosh, maybe something terrible has happened. And in a world, for me, before mindfulness, what would have happened was that thought would be like a train. I'd get on it, and before I know it, I'm miles away exploring that thought in my head without even realizing it. Now the thought comes and I just watch it go across the sky like a cloud. Tim, like you mentioned, you know, that can be a nice way of thinking of these things, that they'll happen, they come and go, but the skill or the training of mindfulness provides that space for us to be aware of them and choose if we want to spend time with those thoughts or emotions or whatever it is, or sensations that come up, or choose something else instead. It's that ability to take more control over choosing where our mind goes, but acknowledging it will. It's normal. Yeah.
Do you find that you're learning more as you go along? Because I mean, I've been doing it for sort of nearly 4 years now, and I keep learning sort of every day. Every time I do a meditation, every day teaches me something more about the practice. Do you guys find that as well? My special.
I'd say absolutely. To me, it's a bit like in Japanese, they have a concept of kaizen, this continual improvement, and for me, meditation is like that, and swimming is like that. You can always learn more, do more, improve more, whatever. But noticing the use of that word improve, what does that mean? Yeah. Like Chris said, and like, when you're talking about how it might be relaxing one time and the next time you could have all of the same set of factors, and you sit to do exactly the same meditation and you have a completely different experience, and there's learning in that. What is, just bringing curiosity to that and kind of that acknowledgement. So yeah, for me, it's always learning.
I think I have to say though, it goes the other way as well. It's unfortunately, I think mindfulness for me is like any good habit, and there are times when I'm able to quite easily engage with it, and I can feel things dropping away in a way, in a good way. I can feel myself being more relaxed overall, more aware, less likely to just keep churning over things in my mind. But I can't say I always keep up a regular practice, and there are times when I lose my practice, and I can quite soon notice that the mind's going back to its kind of old habits at that time as well. So it's not always that you're getting better and better, but you're noticing maybe more quickly with time the difference between like, oh, I haven't practiced for a week or so, and I can feel myself going back to those old habits that I thought I'd let go of.
That's it. I think maybe Mark and I have a bit more sort of encouragement to keep up a regular practice, because our pain tends to increase when we don't. I don't know, but I know that I've learned pretty quickly if I don't do it every day, I suffer for it in pain wise, and then obviously there's knock-on effects and sort of emotionally as well. But yeah, I think you find that, Mark, too, don't you?
It's yeah, for me it does act as it's not the same for everyone, but in my case it really does act as effective pain management. And I think also I really love that quote about you don't have to enjoy it, you just have to do it, because I think that the encouraging thing is that even if it doesn't feel like you're doing a very good job, it's not. I find as long as I give it my best shot, I actually do try to do it, I will get a benefit. Even if it was a rubbish meditation, but I tried. And then also there's a knock on, isn't there? Like you struggle with it, it doesn't really work very well, you don't have a very particularly pleasant experience, but the next time you've laid some groundwork, there's something has happened in the mind, which then there's a carryover, so next time it is a little bit easier. But it is work. And I treat it, I used to treat it as a relaxation. I've done something quite grueling, now I'm going to meditate. I don't do that anymore. I think, no, it's not a relaxation. I'm not going to reward myself with meditation. Meditation is bloody hard work. And I'm going to actually give myself a treat after I've meditated as a reward.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that's important to say, especially if people are going to start, doing this, is that it's not something that necessarily happens quickly. It is a commitment, and it is something, it's sort of equivalent, I suppose, to sort of running a marathon. You don't just go out and run 2 miles and then think, yeah, I can run a marathon now. It's the same with mindfulness. It's something that you have to practice. It's something that you have to make a commitment to yourself and to the practice, and give it some time. Give it, I'm talking months. Don't do it for a week and go, it didn't work. I don't know what you guys think, but
I'd just like to edit the last 3 minutes with Mark's comment and your comment, because I think that really captures it. It's hard work, it's a commitment, but we do it because we hope and see benefits in our own experience with it. But yeah, everyone's experience of that will be different. and yeah, I think maybe noticing my judging thoughts when I read some mindfulness books, and they promise the moon and stars very quickly, and I always find that I find myself getting quite upset by that, because I think it, and I noticed the thoughts come up for me of, gosh, I must be terrible because I haven't experienced that, and I've been doing 8-week programs for years and years and years. So it might be just a comment on me, but these are the thoughts that come up. You know, and that's normal. Yeah, it's a lifelong process, I think, and it's about finding the easiest way and the kind of the most supported way for you to kind of get embed that practice in a way that works for you in your life. Yeah, that's the challenge, and everyone will be different there.
That's brilliant, Dermot. Thank you. I think that's probably a good place to wind up the video, isn't it? Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, okay, I will stop. Thank you, everybody.